Good morning and thank you for joining this live BSI and PDSC webinar. This webinar is the third in our initial three-part series that has explored how to build a digital future securely. This webinar will address what to do about your digital risk. I'm Emma Quigley and I'm here today to help facilitate. I'm delighted to welcome our panel of speakers. We have Simon Newman, the Head of Cyber and Business Services for the Police Crime Prevention Initiatives, PCPI, who are a not-for-profit organisation helping businesses and members of the public reduce their vulnerability, can't speak today, to crime. Within PCPI, Simon is responsible for the Police Digital Security Centre and the National Business Crime Centre. We also have Neil Sinclair. Neil is the National Cyber Lead for the Police Digital Security Centre and was recognised in the Progress 1000 London's Most Influential People 2019 for his work in technology and cybersecurity. Neil has worked in UK counter-terrorism policing for more than 30 years and has been involved in most of the Metropolitan Police's biggest terrorist operations. We're also joined by John Innes, co-founder and CEO of ThreatStatus, a dark web monitoring company located on the south coast of England. John has spent his entire career working in cybersecurity, and prior to forming ThreatStatus, John worked at a number of high-tech cyber companies in various leadership roles, including NCC Group, where he was Director of Product Development, Accumuli Security, HP ArcSight, as well as spending a number of years working in the UK government on cybersecurity related projects. Excuse me. And finally, we have David Mudd, Global Digital and Connected Products Certification Director at BSI. David is responsible for BSI's testing and certification business for digital and connected products, ranging from digital construction, e.g. smart cities and building information modelling, to general connected products such as the Internet of Things, IoT devices and software applications. He supports BSI's clients across the key sectors of built environment, healthcare and food, automotive, aerospace. Before we begin, I need to make you aware that you've joined in mute-only mode, but please feel free to type questions in the control panel and we'll do our best to answer them in the Q&A section at the end of the presentation. We'll also run polls during the course of the webinar to engage with you and get your feedback. So now I'm going to hand you over to our speakers.
Thank you, Emma, and well done for struggling through with that itchy sore throat there. So thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. And thanks for joining us. And again, great to see so many of you back again from the previous two webinars in this series, where we explored the reality of cybercrime, but also the positive benefits of a secure cybersecurity posture, and then how to go about assessing your risk and some initial guidance on sources of support. And if you didn't catch those first two episodes, they're now available on demand and well worth catching up with. And we'll share the link with that with you later. So today we move on. So I know my digital risk. What should I do about it? And hopefully shortly in the chat, as part of this session today, you'll see a link, a URL link. And if you want to paste that and get that web page up, and if you're interested in taking part, we're going to be doing some active live little bit of testing, so to speak, right now live as part of this. But before we get started, we're just going to go for the first poll and see who we've actually got there in the audience today, like we've done for the other two, and just see what mix we've got. So Emma, can we go back over to you for the first poll, please?
Thank you, David. So just a quick poll to see who's out there. So we may understand our audience, how would you describe your function? IT Information Security Manager, Consultant IT Security Provider, Business Owner Manager, and we've put here minimal knowledge of cyber, or other. And if you're feeling brave, please pop in the control panel, if you select other, what that is. So, so we can understand our audience. How would you describe your function? I'll give you a few more seconds to complete that, and then we'll have a look at the answers. Right, let's have a look. We have IT Information Security Manager at 25%, Consultant IT Security Provider at 13%, Business Owner Manager 25%, and Other at 38%.
Okay, thank you. A lot more in the other again. I think we're going to have to do a bit more research again and work out who these others are and make sure we get that.
Definitely.
On that. So thank you, everybody. And you'll see now in the chat link, the link to threatstatus.com /PDSC. So if you would put that in your browser and be ready to join in with an exercise you're going to do later on. Just before I kind of bring in the rest of the team, just to set the background again for today, as we said previously, the ongoing cybercrime war is intensifying through the second wave of COVID. And the accelerating move to digital business and remote working impacts the criminal world as much as legitimate business. And we've seen tactics and technology producing more sophisticated and invasive attacks. And really interestingly, as the software as a service business model, which we're so used to now, and has become part of our everyday business and enabling us, it's now emerged in the criminal world. So we're now seeing ransomware as a service. And just as this has been a huge enabler for businesses, it's now a huge enabler for any nefarious character to attempt sophisticated cybercrime. So something to be aware of, that all these advantages for good can be used for bad, and that's something we have to be very, very mindful of. And just looking at the recent headlines just from the last couple of weeks, we've seen Manchester United and Hackney Borough Council subjected to what appears to be mass sophisticated ransomware attacks. And another critical one as well around FireEye and SolarWinds, which we'll come on to because that's particularly pertinent to potentially to the exercise that we're going to be doing today. So once again, we're saying this is very, very real, getting more sophisticated, and that sophistication is becoming more and more widely available to the bad guys as well as to us in legitimate business. And as you know, Simon and his team are keen to point out, and the fundamental reason for their existence and driving this forward, prevention is the best defense and can be used as a positive differentiator. So last time we looked at how we're setting your digital footprint and understanding the risk, but what are we all doing about it right now today? So we're just going to take another little poll now to look at some of the potential risk mitigators that you may already have in place. So Emma, can we go to poll 2? And if I can ask the audience now to be, remembering this is all completely anonymous, to be read through what we're actually specifically stating in the phrases of these questions, and be as kind of open as you can about how much your organisation is really applying these controls. As you can see in the wording, it's not just about whether controls exist, but are you actually applying them in the right fashion to the right place. So Emma, could we quickly go on to poll 2, please?
Certainly. So we just want to know, does your business, and please select all that apply, does your business verify that all devices are running up-to-date systems, etc.? Enforce two-factor authentication on critical applications, enforce a robust password management policy, have a sound backup and disaster recovery plan, rely on the cloud for data storage. So I'll just give you a moment to, again, make your selections. And a reminder already, can you please get your questions into the control panel, because we'll address those at the end of the presentation. So we just want to know what your business is doing out there. So we'll have a quick look at the results. And we can see that this is good. 75% verify that all devices are running up-to-date systems. 55% enforce two-factor authentication on critical apps, 60% enforce a robust password management policy, 70% have a sound backup and disaster recovery plan, 55% rely on the cloud for data storage. So I'll just pass you back for comment.
Thank you. Really interesting, and thanks everybody for being genuine in your opinion about how this is being applied to your organisation. So yeah, this is really interesting, because obviously all of you are here on this call because you're taking cybersecurity seriously, and you believe it being critical to your business. But it does show that with some of these key controls, there's still potentially a bit of some gaps out there. Neil, if I can just bring you in at this point here, we're going to start looking at, as I know, the kind of what positive steps we can take. But we discussed amongst ourselves as a team here, what are the likely kind of critical controls that are already in place? I don't know what your thoughts are on that set of results, and how that reflects what you've seen elsewhere, and then what really from that should the audience start to be thinking about in terms of positive steps?
Yeah, can we just put the results back up, Emma? Would that be possible?
Just go back to them now. Would you like me to read them again?
No, it's all right. That's fine. So obviously the key issues have remained the same, and I think will remain the same for the foreseeable future. The one that any talk you go to, any article you read now after the password management policy is two-factor authentication. It's down there at 55%, which I have to say I think is quite low, and I think it's something that every business should attend to. It's very simple, it's free, it's on every device, it's on virtually certainly every social media platform that we go to. So there is really no excuse for not having two-factor authentication, and with us working more and more at home, it becomes even more critical because it forms a kind of perimeter defence around the whole business network. So
Neil, can I just comment on that one, because I know from our perspective within BSI, it's something that has escalated and we're using it more and more within our organisation. And it start off with there was a bit of resistance. So every time we got to do this, it's yet another text comes through or whatever the other factor is. But it was amazing how quickly it just became business as usual, and the complaints completely stopped. And it's not really seen as such an issue whatsoever. So we've really seen a culture change in our organisation from it being seen as a pain and something that was obstructing regular work to something that is just smooth, works fine, has no real negative impact, and everyone, particularly we've seen in that remote working, totally accepts it and gets on with it. I don't know if that's been that initial resistance is something you've seen elsewhere, but it's amazing how I've seen it totally change in BSI.
Yeah, I think it is. I think the whole thing about being digitally aware and sort of engaged in IT, everybody expects it to be really fast and really easy all the time. And if we go back historically, when PCs first started appearing in offices, the thing that nobody liked doing was firstly logging on in the morning. That was really difficult because it took ages. And then the next thing that happened was you would see the box pop up saying update required. Well, let's be honest, who of us before 2012 ever did an update? We didn't, because it took too much time. And the beauty of computers is they're instant. Well, I think if anything that we have to learn through this 10-month awful period we've been through of working from home is actually nothing, unless you're a surgeon or a police officer or a fireman, is that urgent. And you can take a moment to make sure that actually you are secure, that you are up to date, that everything is running properly. And it's before you walk out of the door, you check you've got your glasses, your keys, your wallet, your watch. Well, it almost has to become the same when we start to log on to any of these internet connected devices. And I'm using that term in its widest sense now. If your oven is connected to the internet, well, make sure it's secure before you switch it on, because the ramifications down the line are going to be worth that 10 minutes of pain, that 10 minutes of not doing something you're being paid to do or not doing something you want to do, are going to be so much of a benefit to you further down the line. And I think it's easy to get distracted, because if you read the broadsheets or the technical magazines, the things that we should be being concerned about are quantum computing and things like that. Well, come on. At the moment, we're not doing proper passwords, so let's not worry about those things. Let's get the basics right and make them part of our everyday living. And if anything, as I say, the last 10 months has helped with that, because it now is part of that. And hopefully there's nobody on this call who sits at home and logs in and thinks, I'll ignore that update until tomorrow. They do it, they go away and have a coffee. So that's, so I think the things on that poll will remain current until we're up there at 90%, 100%. Obviously, people will always ignore it. We have anti-vaxxers, we have anti-password people as well, who think who'll turn around and tell you that doing a complicated password of 24 letters just means it's 24 times 6, things that a cryptologist has to go through, and actually they'll crack that in 12 seconds. Well, yes, they will, but actually what they want to do is be able to crack it in 1 second. And if it takes 12 seconds, they'll go to the person where they crack it in 1 second. So, it's all about it becoming part of just the way we do it as far as being internet connected goes.
And I think that's great, Neil, the way you framed that in terms of what are our priorities over the last 10 months and what's urgent and how you define urgent. And looking at those numbers, I would certainly say, as you're right, two-factor authentication and a robust password management. If there are two things that we need to see going up from 50, 60% to 95, 100%, it's those two, absolutely. And you mentioned there about anti-vaxxers, and as much as there are people that might be anti it, there's a lot of people that are really pro it as well. And what we have seen, and I think I mentioned on this before, is this becoming yet another phishing vector now then as well. As we said before, the criminal feeds on our fear, and that's that, as we've seen, is one of the latest. When you're then looking at what's out there, Neil, it's something we've seen specifically now around vaccines kind of thing then as well.
Yeah, very much so. I think this morning's news that the vaccines aren't going to be done, aren't going to really start rolling out till Christmas. And I'm speaking to a number of people who are saying, oh, my GP surgery says they can't handle it and all this sort of stuff. So that's obviously increasing the panic, and now the thought that we won't be clear by April, but it might go on until autumn 2021 and all this sort of stuff. So what we're starting to see, this is an American example we have on the screen now, particularly because Pfizer said that they weren't going to be able to deliver the vaccines as expeditiously as they'd hoped. But this is what's been popping into people's inboxes. And it says that it's not hugely sophisticated. It will possibly not even have the receipt's name on it, or the person it's directed to, their name on it, but it's a very generic and good-looking email, and it plays on everybody's fears. Less stock of the COVID-19 vaccine, high increase in demand, and we can ease distribution directly to you because we know you can't get there. So it plays on all those sort of social engineering facets of a classic phishing email, but is particularly on something that's on everybody's mind at the moment. And of course, it's you click on the PDF at the bottom, and it's just trying to trawl personal details, and it'll pick up names, addresses, dates of birth, all that sort of stuff. The key things for the cyber criminal. And if you're really unlucky, it'll ask you to put in financial details as well and pay 65 quid or $65 for the vaccine to be sent directly to you. Which, of course, sadly, people will do, even though they've never applied a vaccine to themselves in their lives. They'll suddenly think, actually, this is going to keep me alive, or my older family alive. My other half resents it, them saying, don't kiss your granny because she's only 57, and she is one. But things like that, and people will react to it because it plays on people's fears, and that's what the phishing emails always do. And of course, the worst ones will have the words urgent on them. If you want to enjoy Christmas, do this now. And,
yeah, absolutely.
Because people have this wrong idea about what is actually urgent. It's nothing that comes through on the internet is that urgent.
Yeah, exactly, and that. But when we're in this kind of situation again, everyone's behaviours are impacted by your kind of stress of work, stress of home, stress of distance family. And again, I know we've dwelled on this a bit over the series, but again, this is so important, whether you're ICT manager, whether you're a business manager, to understand that it's not as simple as telling your team, oh, don't click on this. When you're working from home, as Neil said in the last one, you're in an environment where all kinds of things around you that will influence you, and we do become more susceptible. I think knowing what's out there and knowing this environment, is so important. Another thing, we mentioned one of the recent significant cybersecurity incidents, and it's not necessarily all about doing where you might respond to a phishing attack like this. There are some things that you're doing that may be fully acceptable in terms of cybersecurity, but can still potentially impact you. And this is where I want to bring John into the discussion here. We mentioned a bit about FireEye and the incident at the beginning, something I picked up on it, and you and I were discussing earlier today. It'd be really useful if you could then talk a little bit then about what you guys do around threat status in this particular incident, and help bring to life yet another area where all managers need to be aware of in terms of how our digital footprint is out there and how vulnerable it may be.
Sure, yeah, I'd be delighted. So security is a multifaceted discipline, and we're always being pulled in different directions about things that we need to focus on in order to keep our business secure and our applications secure. But one of the areas that people, I think, are still really not very well tuned into at the moment is, I'll use the term supply chain risk, I guess. So what I mean by supply chain is not necessarily, actually where you buy your pencils from or where you buy your printers from. I mean, when we talk about supply chain now, we're really talking about almost any service on the internet that you use is really a supplier of yours now. So to give you an example, you should think of LinkedIn as a supplier. That's something that you use on a daily basis. It has quite a lot of your data. Really, it is supplying you with a service. And because you're not necessarily paying for it, then it doesn't mean that it's not a relevant supplier to your organization. Now, back in 2012, I think it was, LinkedIn got quite famously hacked. And now, I mean, that was like nearly a decade ago now. But during that attack, what the attackers managed to get hold of was a huge amount of data about people in their working lives. So they actually managed to get their corporate emails, possibly their personal emails. But one of the critical pieces of information during that attack was the password that they used to log into LinkedIn. So this was, at the time, quite a revelation. LinkedIn's a pretty big business platform and we all rely on it. But those passwords were stolen, subsequently cracked. And then people who don't change their passwords frequently have now effectively lost a username and a password associated with their work infrastructure that could well be used to access their corporate email or something like that. So when David and Neil, you were talking about the importance of 2FA and things like that, if you don't have those controls in place, it might not be that you've done anything wrong. You haven't handed over your usernames and your passwords to attackers. You've not put them anywhere insecurely, but you have entrusted them with one of your suppliers. And if that supplier becomes vulnerable, then potentially that material gets leaked into the hands of criminals. And if you're not doing the right things with using unique passwords and implementing two-factor authentication, you've just become massively exposed. So to your point, Neil, actually, you don't need to be the best security practitioner, but you have to be better than everybody else. That's the bar that we need to set ourselves. And in the news this week, the hot story, as you mentioned, David, is FireEye. For those people who are on the call that aren't familiar with this company, they are seen as one of the most sophisticated cybersecurity companies in the world. They hire the best people. They do a lot of government work in the US. They're highly regarded as being at the very top of their game. They've just been compromised. They've been very, very good at the way that they've declared that incident. So they've gone public. They've told everyone that they've been compromised. But as things are unfolding right now, it appears that one of their suppliers, who is someone that monitors their IT systems, actually got the compromise. So the attackers managed to get into their supplier and then flow down into FireEye's network. So technically, FireEye didn't do anything wrong other than trust the supplier. The supplier's been compromised, and now they have a problem. And it also appears, it's an evolving event, but it also appears that supplier may have been compromised because their usernames and their passwords had been shared on the internet at some point in the distant past. So attackers got hold of it, and then they could then compromise SolarWinds' network, which then compromised FireEye's network and dozens of other networks now. So the moral of the story is actually that some of these companies and people on the call would have done nothing wrong, but they could well be exposed to vulnerabilities through someone else's actions. So I would like to introduce everyone to a quick tool on our website. So if you go to www.threatstatus.com, there's a search bar right on the front page there. And it's completely optional, of course, but if you want to put in your corporate email address into that box, it won't ask you for any other information. Put your corporate email address in there. It can't be a Hotmail address or a Gmail address. It's got to be a work one. But if you want to put your email address in there and click submit, what will happen is a service will run in the background and it will go and check on all these criminal forums and dark markets and things like that, over 8,000 data points, and it will see whether anybody has leaked your usernames and your passwords from over 8,000 sources so far. And that will come back instantly, and you'll know yes or no almost instantly whether or not there's data out there for you. If you've never done one of these exercises before, it's always quite interesting to see what gets revealed. And if it does come back and confirm that there's some data out there, then if you'd like to go to threatstatus.com/PDSC, then you'll be able to sign up for an account to be able to get access directly to see what that data is. So you can kind of pull back the covers a little bit and see what's in there. But yeah, so that's one of the things that we now need to do a lot more is monitor where our data is leaking from, because there is a data breach on the internet almost every day now. Some big company, you think of the big names and they would have been compromised. People like Adobe, eBay have all suffered in the past, and even my own data turned up on this service recently when a company called Promo.com got compromised. This was about a month ago, and we use that service to create animation videos. It's a very nice little online service where you can create explainer videos, and so it's a marketing tool. I created an account on there, it got compromised, and then our service reported that my data had turned up on there. So again, I didn't do anything wrong. I just used an online service to help me with my day job, and then I ended up with an issue. So people like the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK and the FBI in the US are now advising people to start monitoring for third-party data breaches, because the more this information is pouring out, the more material that attackers have got to come at you with. And just a last point on Neil's phishing email there. Another company recently got compromised was a PDF conversion company. And this was particularly interesting for us because as we started working through the data, what we could see was the usernames and the passwords, but we could also see file names that companies had uploaded and converted into PDF, or they'd uploaded PDFs and converted them into Word. So when our data team started working through it, not only could we see these usernames and passwords, we could see file names as well. So we could see company X internal policy .doc, for example. So at that point, if I want to create an awesome phishing email, I've got usernames, passwords, probably first names, and I've actually got file names now that people are likely to open because they're much more explicit. So it's quite important, if you're not doing it now, in the future, to start kind of monitoring a little bit more about what's being leaked about your business and about your company.
Thanks, John. I mean, that really does bring it to life. And I know in the US, for instance, the Department of Defense has seen this kind of leaking of lower level, so kind of below kind of secret, kind of lower level, but still privileged data from their supply chain as a massive risk. And it's something we're involved with in the US as well, looking at a cybersecurity maturity model and solutions for that over there. And they're talking about 300,000 suppliers into the DoD, and they're saying this is such a big issue now, they're looking to bring in some regulation around it. So when we're talking then about 55% of the audience out there today having 2FA and only 60% having a robust password policy, the best way to prevent this kind of issue is regular changing of those passwords and having multi-factor authentication quite clearly, and really bringing it to life when you're talking about the kind of attack where it's not necessarily just your credentials, but also files and potentially confidential or restricted information as well. So that really does bring it to life there, John. So yeah, in terms of putting through what kind of information is somebody then does enter their details on there, can they expect to see from the report that you generate?
So if they just put in their so there's like a two-stage thing here. So if they just want to put in their email address on that front page of threatstatus.com, what that will return to them, so it will go out and it'll inspect over 8,000 different data points and data leaks, and it will return if we've seen your email address in any of those 8,000 data breaches, if we've seen any encrypted passwords in those data breaches, and most importantly, if we've seen any clear text passwords in those data breaches. Right. So the point is, if I use my corporate email address and I use the same password everywhere, so for example, this promo website, and I'd gone and created a little animation video and I'd use the password of pencil, and I happen to really like that password, then the service will now kind of be able to say to you, look, there's data out there, the password you use is pencil, then the people will be able to come back and kind of go, okay, I need to fix that. So it will return statistics about that, and then if they want to go onto that //PDSC page, then they can create a free account where it will actually expose which websites that data was taken from, and they can kind of see all of the people in their business that may have leaked that data. So again, like to be really explicit, that there is absolutely zero blame here. Like this is absolutely nothing of anyone's fault other than the websites that got compromised. But even then, they were victims in their own right. So they didn't deserve to get hacked, but they may have done. So it's really just a big lens on the underside of the internet.
If I just checking to see whether anyone's been brave enough to go through, and hopefully they have. I did that myself earlier on today, and as you said, it's just the email address is the only thing here, not passwords or anything more sensitive. So I would suggest some do. While you're just taking a look at that, John, Simon, we're just wondering. I know you're looking very much at what's happening nationally at the kind of the UK level and this kind of thing. Then. Just want to bring you in for any comments on what we said so far in terms of the emerging and developing threat landscape and what organisations should be prioritising right now, or anything to reflect on from what we've been discussing so far.
Yeah, thanks, David. I think there's a few things that both John and Neil have said, which I thoroughly support, and also the feedback from the polls, which I thought was also really interesting. I mean, two things just to take out from that. I think on a positive, I'm really pleased to see. I've just made some notes here about the number of or percentage of people who have contingency plans or critical incident plans, disaster recovery plans in place, which is great. So in the event that you do suffer an attack or a breach, the fact that you've thought about it and you've thought about how to get your systems back up and running quickly, I think it's a really positive step. So I'm really pleased to see that's a big step change, I think, that we've seen in the last couple of years. So that's a good thing. I think you've mentioned as well, David, this issue about password management is a worry. 60% of respondents there have a robust password policy in place. That needs to be much higher. And it's, as Neil said at the beginning, it's one of the easiest things that people can and certainly should do. Just to share, as John was talking there, I was reflecting on my own experience. I had my personal email compromised probably a couple of months ago. When I investigated that particular incident, it was quite staggering to see, I guess to one extent, my digital footprint, but I had over 49 different sites where I'd used passwords. Some of those sites I'd inadvertently used the same password going back many years. I found using sites like John a number of places where my data had been compromised, including Adobe and LinkedIn, to name two of those that have already been mentioned. And it's quite scary when you look at how far your data actually goes out into the public domain, and equally what sort of data these people now have. Adobe being a great example, lots of detail about me, my accounts, passwords, encrypted passwords, and purchase history. So they actually are able to take quite a significant amount of data that's out there. I think just looking forward in terms of things that we're seeing now as threats. I think as Neil said to some extent, that the threats they do evolve. Criminals are always trying to find new and innovative ways of attacking individuals and businesses as a way of obtaining information. I think what we're likely to see in the SME space over the next 12 months to 2 years is more in the way of ransomware attacks. And these seem to be more generic as opposed to targeted attacks. So you may just inadvertently be caught up through a ransomware attack simply because you visited a website, or as John says, you're part of that supply chain in some way. So that's certainly something we're starting to see more of. And we know from working with financial companies and insurers, they are starting to see a rise in that, certainly in the SME space. So that's probably the big trend that we're very closely watching for at the moment. But other things, really, it's, as we've seen and heard in recent times, and the example Neil put on the screen there, lots and lots of criminals taking a big opportunity to make the most of things like Brexit and to make the most of incidents like the COVID-19 pandemic as well. Just relying on panic or uncertainty or new ways of working. criminals seek to exploit, and it's pulling at some of those heartstrings and other things, the triggers that work, which only takes a few of those and some of those criminals work. So it's about remaining constantly vigilant.
Yeah, and thank you, Simon. So one of the key outcomes, what do we want to get by the end of this today, was looking at, okay, we talked about, some of the solutions that are out there, and as you can see from this graphic we put together for the last one, the things you can build up to build a kind of layered defense that's an ongoing defense as well. And that's absolutely critical. But whether you're a large business or a small business, right now, spending is tight. And in practical terms, whether you're a small business owner or an ICT manager in a larger business, what do you prioritize on to get the biggest bang for your buck, mitigate your risk, and create that positive message within your business? And it seems quite clearly, looking at this diagram and looking at the data and what we've heard today, it looks to me like what we're saying is that password management and two-factor authentication is basically the drawbridge and the front door in, and whilst everyone on this webinar today is obviously passionate around cybersecurity, wants to learn and wants to make sure their organizations are safe, we're still seeing a very large number that are not addressing those passwords and two-factor authentication. So going back to Neil, I know one of the things we discussed earlier was what are the things that we should focus on right now. That seems to me to be low-hanging fruit that doesn't necessarily cost a huge lot to invest in. What are your thoughts on that, and what should be the takeaways around lifting those numbers up from 55 and 60 up to the 95, 100?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is the NCSC's 10-step plan, which everything on there is free and easy to install, and there we have it in front of us now. So all those things should be key to any business owner. But I think John mentioned it a couple of times, the no blame factor. And I think that is really important to stress in the business place. Now, we understand the majority of businesses are made up of less than 5 people. So often this doesn't even come into one's orbit, because you naturally employ people you like and trust. But people do make mistakes. And I think it is really important in the cyber world to say, look, we all make mistakes. For heaven's sake, GCHQ made a massive mistake allowing Edward Snowden to plug in his USB sticks. So, even the most savvy make mistakes. I think it's really important that you allow yourself, your family, your employees to put their hands up when they make a mistake and say, look, I've done this, it was an accident, hopefully it was an accident. How can we repair this? And I think a big step to putting all of these in place is knowing that if it goes wrong, well, you've done your best, and it's an accident, and it happens. So that would be the big drive, I think, would be to say, look, let's get these 10 things in place. As Simon said, it's really good that we're seeing so many people have now set up the risk management regime, the incident plans. That's really key. But having set those up, you have to share them with your employees. You have to tell them what the plan is. And of course, the great thing is, and I know David's going to come on to this a little bit, but it's no good just the C-suite, if we're in a bigger organization, just the C-suite knowing the plan. Because there will be people out there who know more than you. And this is one of the great things about cyber. We've got a whole generation coming up who've grown up with it, whereas us, 3 of us old fogies and John, we've had to learn it. It's something that was new to us, and we were maybe slow to jump on. Maybe some of us were quicker than others, but it's something we've had to learn. Now we've got a generation coming through who know nothing else except this. Hopefully their skills are good, but actually they're not, because it's a very disposable industry for them. Passwords, schmasswords. Every 14-year-old boy in the country will know one of his teacher's passwords. I can guarantee it. So if the teachers are throwing away passwords while they're standing in the queue for sandwiches and lunch, then how are the kids going to learn? So all these sort of things, and it's very easy to do. None of this is really complicated. It's all out there. It's just thinking about it all the time, I think, David.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point because, as you said, I'm going to come on and talk about culture, and this isn't around the ICT team, putting some controls in place. It's around the culture through the business. And yes, that starts at the top. But a very, very important point you made there. This is not just about forcing a policy down and making sure everyone's taking it seriously. That culture has to work both ways in that you're not there with a big stick. You have to encourage within your culture. We talk a lot in other forums, we talk about product development and people putting connected products out there around responsible disclosure and vulnerability disclosure. And part of this, as you're saying, is having the right environment within and culture within your organization that encourages people to come clean as soon as possible and limit risk rather than feel, oh, I've done something wrong here, I better cover it up, cover my tracks so I don't get told off for it. So I think it's a really, really good point. And that culture is not just around making sure everyone takes it seriously, but it also works both ways in terms of encouraging people, not just to talk around issues and problems they've had, but something we've had within BSI. We actually report adverse events in a similar way we would with health and safety. So we had one recently where inadvertently one of my team sending an email around internally, and he sent it also to Gary, but it went to Gary, one of the external people that he was emailing a lot, and he hadn't picked it up. He admitted it. Luckily, all that was about, this was right back in around February, it was about adverse weather, just saying, oh, there's been a bad accident on the M1, so there was no damage done. But he came forward about it, and that helped influence a minor change to pop up whenever you put anyone that's external on this kind of thing in your address list. There's a warning that pops up. Do you know this is an external person? So again, that openness we find really, really useful for encouraging people then not just to say when something's gone wrong, but also to think about what possible opportunities there are for improvement. And that's when you really start to get the excellence part of it there. So thanks, Neil, I totally agree. And that's a brilliant new angle you put on in there in terms of that openness. So just very quickly want to talk around culture, because we do think that collectively this is the single most important thing. You can have all the controls in place you like, but it comes down to people as well. So Emma, can we just go to the next poll really, and really want to find out how you would describe the audience would describe the cybersecurity culture within your organization. Now, this is important for us. This gives us some real good insight in terms then of attitudes across the industry, accepting the fact that you out there are taking this very seriously. How is it with your organization? Emma, over to you.
Thank you, David. So how do you see the cybersecurity culture in your organization? Clear, focused, priority driven from the top, just part of business as usual, ICT's responsibility, emerging as a key theme, or an inconsistent mix of the above. So I'll give you a few moments again, and a reminder for everybody to type the questions in for the Q&A at the end of the presentation. So if you type them into the control panel, and also just to draw your attention to handouts that are made available in that control panel too, along with the threat status links as well. So how do you see the cybersecurity culture in your organization? And we'll have a quick look at the results. And we have 32% clear, focus, priority, 11% part of business as usual, 11% ICT's responsibility, 21% emerging as a key theme, and 26% mix of the above. And I'll hand you back for comment.
Thanks, Emma. Again, probably as expected, a really interesting mix. And again, reflecting the fact that some of you are maybe driving this within your organisation, and others, you're maybe the lone voice out there, seeking to get engagement from the rest of the team. And Simon and Neil, John, from your views and your experience elsewhere, we've got a lot there where we're talking about emerging and still inconsistent. But there was obviously we've got one batch here is saying, yeah, it's clear and focused, but then that's maybe those who are driving the organisation themselves on this call. but aside from that, a real spread, particularly around that it's emergent or inconsistent. How does that kind of resonate with what you're seeing?
Yeah, I'll go first if that's all right, David. Yeah, I think that's a fairly consistent theme of what we're seeing elsewhere with other organisations we engage with. I think just going back to an earlier point that you made, David, and I think you nailed this in terms of culture. The key thing for me, it's about rewarding positive behaviour. So, staff that are following the right process, that are raising their hands up when they see something that doesn't look right, that are bringing issues to the attention of senior managers, actually reward that behaviour, because that encourages a step change in behaviour within that organisation. What you don't want to do is encourage a culture where there's fear, that people are concerned of making mistakes, and therefore they don't report a mistake perhaps to their IT managers or others for a number of hours. And of course, in a cyber incident, hours are critical, minutes are critical in many cases. The sooner that someone feels empowered to raise that, it's really, really important. So I think that's one of the things I would certainly say on the culture front. Just one other thing I wanted to just add, again, sort of more to do with processes perhaps as an organisation, but something we often see within organisations is around what I call offboarding policies. So when staff, contractors and others who have access to your data and your services leave the organisation for whatever reason, how long does it take your organisation to offboard them? And by that I mean restrict or remove their access to your systems. Many organisations I speak to don't do that immediately. Many of them leave it weeks, sometimes months, in one or two cases even longer. All that time, that person may well be working for a rival, but they still continue to have access to your information. And so it's those simple things, just about reviewing policies and making sure that you implement them, just to reduce the risk of any harm coming to your organisation.
And that doesn't cost anything in terms of IT infrastructure here. So we're not, and this is the kind of thing I think it's important for the audience to take out there, things you can take back to your organisation, you can do today that will have a material impact on your cybersecurity hygiene, your cybersecurity posture. And I really like that in terms of the rewarding the positive behaviour, because that really, I think you're right, that in a sentence there, that then builds that culture. Just aware of the time here. So what I want to do is we've talked, I won't dwell on this again, but quickly show you, just to remind those who are new, for those who haven't seen it before, we have a very straightforward journey we can take people on, from that initial awareness, training support, building the necessary tools that are then appropriate to allow you to gain some competence, mitigate your risk, demonstrate compliance and differentiate. I'm not going to ram this home any more than we need to, other than there's lots of free information available on the PDSC website, on our website. We've talked around the 10 steps, and as you can see, those 10 steps become part of our assurance scheme around digitally resilient. And that's something that we're going to be focusing on in more detail into next year. But looking at where we are today, what we wanted to achieve over the last few weeks on the 3 webinars, we started off just making sure we're all clear of the relevance and the harsh reality of the situation regarding cybercrime that Simon really brought to life with some great stats all the way through the number of crimes down through to the number of convictions, that quite clearly says prevention is the way ahead here. We looked a bit about risk assessments, and in particular then looking at where you have control and where you don't have control. And I think that's massively reinforced today with John's insight into perfectly legitimate supply chain, and basically anyone that you're doing business with, you're doing business with digitally. And LinkedIn was out there, but there's all of those less direct supply chain, those engagements that you have limited control over. But again, it's reinforced in then today. You need to know this and understand this to manage your risk. Then the purpose of today was to say, okay, we're going to start putting plans together, and we can look at a robust cybersecurity position. What do we need to do right now? What can we do right now? Bearing in mind, we're all stretched for time. We're all stretched for money right now, no matter whether we're a SME, whether we're a sole trader, or whether we're a global mega company. We're all stretched. but I think we can see the threat is extremely real, and there's some very straightforward, low-cost things that even those on this call right now who are obviously passionate around cybersecurity and want to learn, there's lots going on out there that needs to be sorted within organizations around password management, two-factor authentication to mitigate that very, very significant supply chain risk. So to take that back to your organizations now, it's around that supply chain risk, simple things you can do to actually mitigate that, and how much stronger you as a business will be and reinforcing that positive behavior. So Simon, thanks for your brief on that. And I now want to pass across then to Neil, to any other things to add to that before we go on to where we want to take this through into next year. Hello, Neil.
Was that for Neil?
For me, sorry, for me.
Yes, sorry, Neil. Simon, no problem. Now over to Neil. Do apologise.
Yeah. No, I think the summary is really good. I think for me, the key thing is to talk within your business about the best way to move this forward. I think one person taking on the responsibility, when we're talking about small businesses now, obviously, one person taking the responsibility, it's a lot of weight. And as I said previously, there are people out there who will have great ideas about cybersecurity and think slightly differently outside the box, even within the box, about how to put this forward. And it is all about people, really, because the NCSC had a little while where they said, we don't like saying that the weakest link is the people, but let's face it, where cyber's concerned, as John rightly said, you can put in absolutely everything. You can be the best, or the best in class, and still something will happen that will allow it to break. And it's, I did it the other night, walked in late at night, left the keys in the door all night. And I'm not yet that old. So little things like that. And those are things that you need to think about. It's that continual people element that will break even the best plans, but also the people will help you build the best plan.
Good point. It's again, we go back to Simon's positivity here. Yeah, the people might be the weakest link, but they're also the strong factor that can really differentiate your organisation. Thank you. John, any comments? Obviously, you're new to this panel, but from what you're hearing us discuss today, appreciate your overall views and any guidance very briefly for the audience out there.
Well, so I think the first thing is I've really enjoyed the panel. Actually, I think it's been really fun. But actually, I mean, as a small business owner myself, one of the things, so I can see the problem from every angle. Like, I've got budgets to control. Times are difficult. I don't want to spend money unnecessarily, but it is important for me to kind of keep my security posture up. And my CTO needs to convince me to spend money when I don't necessarily want to. But one of the things that works really well for us, actually, which is per your slide, David, is about getting some compliance, because that really sets you on a path to doing things. So for the people on the call, for example, Cyber Essentials is quite an easy thing to get going with. It's quite cheap to get going with, but part of that process is, have you got X? Have you got Y? Are you doing Z? And you kind of say, yes, no, here's some data. And actually, when we did that, and we are a security company, and we think we're pretty good at what we do. But as we were doing that, my CTO came back to me and he said, we need to get a couple of new mobile phones. And I was like, well, everyone's got brand new phones. Why do we need to do that? He said, well, unfortunately, during the process of going through the questionnaire, we had a couple of Huawei phones. And because of the US wranglings at the moment with Google and China and all this kind of stuff, Huawei aren't getting updates to their phones. So the process, like going through the compliance process, made us go and look at our assets, made us go and look at which assets, even though they were new, weren't going to qualify as a secure device. And then so the moral of the story was, we took the compliance process seriously. We answered the questions honestly. We were then, it said, this is a couple of areas we need to improve on. We improved on them. We got our Cyber Essentials. So it gave complete justification to the spend, why we were doing it. And now I don't want to lose my Cyber Essentials. So when he comes back to me next year and says, we've got to update System X, because if we don't, we're going to fall behind on our compliance, then I'll have to do it. So for the people on the call, I think actually sometimes you can be tempted to go through a regulatory process from a tick box perspective. You know, we want the sticker to win the business. Anybody can do that, but I think if you actually engage it and mean it and try and do it honestly, then it will tell you what you need to know to get better, and it will become motivational to your budget holders. So
yes, John, thanks, and that's a great point. I mean, the way obviously BSI, you know, very much the standards and compliance, not so much compliance, standards focused organisation. What we talk about is not around compliance with the standard, it's about using the standards to build a better business. So the standards aren't there to have a box to be ticked. The standards are there to make your business better, more resilient. That's what they're there for. That's how you should treat compliance, not as oh, I've got that tick. It's building a better business. That's a very good point. And if you go to the PDSC website or to BSI, you'll see we start at even an earlier stage in Cyber Essentials with just some very basics. And there is very straightforward guidance in there, totally free engagement that you can then see what's right for you, because we do know it's confusing out there. And the other key thing I want to say for those of you out there who are MSPs, consultants, all this kind of thing, we need you to engage with our program as well, because one of the other things that small businesses struggle with is who do they trust for advice? Who do they trust will give them a solution that will actually deliver? And so we also have a scheme out there for trusted advisors, trusted security providers to actually help. So any of you out there, please engage with us on that. And you know, we want to build that community then of trusted support. Thank you, everybody. Now, going on to next year, these three were kind of the scene setters. Hopefully there's some takeaways we're going to go on, you know, finalise on again today. But looking at next year, what we want to do is take those 10 steps that form the heart of our digital resilience program and go through that in more depth with you, the audience. So we'd like to understand really from your perspective where you want us to start. So we've taken the 10, and I'll just quickly go back to that, which starts off with setting your risk management regime. And what we'll probably do is look what we've done on risks before and frame it within this. But going on from that, there are another 9 that are broadly grouped into kind of technical controls and then more the people-focused controls. So we're just going to have another couple of polls out there of what you want to see as a priority from this. So Emma, can I just go back to you for the next 2 polls? And it's your chance now to help shape where we start going into next year.
Thank you, David. So I think we'll be running a couple of back-to-back ones. Yep. Which would be your preferred next topics? So if you just cast your votes against network security, secure configuration, malware prevention, managing user privileges, monitoring. So I'll just leave that one for a couple of seconds, and a quick reminder, get those questions in because we'll be going on to the Q&A shortly. So of these 5, we've got more coming up. Which would be your preferred next topics? And we'll have a very quick look at what's come in.
So we'll be covering them all, but it'd be great to know what you, the audience, would like us to prioritise, really.
So at the moment, for network security, 52%, secure configuration, 38%, malware prevention, 33%, managing user privileges, 62%, so our highest, and monitoring at 43%. Fairly well spread, but managing user privileges and network security just creeped ahead there.
Great. Well, again, we're all seeing all of those being important, and it's just a case really of your chance to influence where we start, rather than where our total focus is going to be. Thanks. Then on to the next one.
For the next few, which would be your preferred next topics: user education awareness, removable media controls, incident management, home and mobile working. So again, I'll just give you a couple of seconds to cast your votes on there, and then we'll be able to have another quick look. That'll help us guide the topics for next year. So looking at the results for this one, and we have user education awareness 48%, removable media controls 33%, incident management 43%, home and mobile working 67%. So probably given the situation we're in, I'm not surprised that one's so high.
Yeah, absolutely. And whilst we have touched on it, this next series will be some focused basically looking at some focus controls, actions, and all this kind of to take around those areas. So thank you very much to all of you for contributing throughout today. So I just want to, do we have anything in terms of questions that we can address the audience before we just do a final roundup?
I think we could probably just squeeze in a question and then perhaps do a roundup. I'm conscious we are at 11, aren't we?
Oh, we are, sorry, yes. So at least get one in.
Yeah, and it's no surprise really. With phishing being so omnipresent and dangerous, is there a practical method for blocking unwanted emails? Which we've obviously taken a look at today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know who wants to go first. Neil, from the practical side of things here. Obviously, there are all kinds of tools out there for doing this.
Yes, it's a really difficult one. I know of some IT departments who are saying we should just block all Gmail and Yahoo and AOL, which is somewhat extreme and probably very risky to business. And the difficult thing is, of course, is it revolves so much around your business requirements. Who knows where that next big order is coming from? So it is really difficult just to block them. You can do whitelists. Whitelisting is possible, and that is that your email server only allows in emails that are on your contact list. But of course, there are dangers to that too, where as John referred to earlier, your supply chain has had stuff hacked and their emails are out there, and people mask them. So it is really difficult. There is no simple way. Is the straight answer. The best thing is to think before you click. And if you are in any doubt about anything that comes in on an email, there's still that very old-fashioned but solid way. Pick up the phone and ask the person who sent it if they sent it, and if the stuff in it is really what they sent.
Yeah, so again, I think the key point here is there is that inevitable continuum between being completely secure and having effective, communication and collaboration. And where do you sit on that continuum? And this is inevitably going to be a balance of pragmatic blocking with education. And I think the education is the key point here, because no matter where you set that, apart from completely restrictive, in which case it's like to impact your business, something could get through. And even if you are completely restrictive, something can get through. So I think it all comes down to start with education is the key point. Yeah. I'm just aware of time. So what I want to do is just one last word around the team from everybody. And from me, I just want to say thanks for everyone for your active participation today. And just one takeaway from everybody. If I could start with Simon, chucking at the deep end, one takeaway for everyone from today.
Yeah, thank you, David, and thank everyone for joining us. I think the takeaway for me is just concentrate on getting the basics right. Understand where your risk is and what simple controls that you can put in place, which are often free or very low cost, just to reduce your vulnerability. So focus on the basics.
Thanks. John, over to you. Any particular one thing, what you said about being that small business owner yourself, that everyone should take away today?
There's so many, but I guess we've all said it already. User awareness. You can't train people to be experts at everything, but if you can get them on the journey with you, like Neil said, get them involved in what you're trying to do and supportive of what you're trying to do, then that's half the battle. And actually, just on the phishing thing, I'll just quickly chuck one idea out there. There's lots of tools, but in bigger organizations, what they'll do is they'll set up a mailbox called, is this a phish at mycompany.com or something like that. And so for the people in the IT organization who don't know how to tell a phishing email or not, just get them to forward it on. If they're not sure, get them to forward it onto there, and you can reply to that and go, this one looks okay, or don't click it. That's a good shout. So that is a little freebie, but there's lots of ways of doing that. But
yeah, thanks, John. That is a really good tip, and I have seen that used, and that's a really good idea. Neil, last thoughts from you.
Yeah, keep it short. I think we have to view cybersecurity as part of safeguarding, which everybody's aware of. And as with anything in safeguarding, doing nothing is not an option.
Exactly, thank you. So for me, for everybody, it's rewarding that positive behaviour, And then I'm going to chip in a couple more because I can on the last one here to say passwords and two-factor authentication are simple things that you can embody that will dramatically reduce that risk of all the bad stories we said. They're not the golden bullet for everything, but there's gaps out there from you, the audience. So those are some of that low-hanging fruit, as Simon said. So thanks to everybody once again. And I hope you all have a good break and into the new year, and join us next year where we're focusing far more in depth on building those 10 steps to cybersecurity. Thanks and stay safe. Emma, back over to you for the last few words. Thanks, everybody.
I just want to obviously thank the panel and all our attendees for joining us. And very quickly, as we were talking phishing at the end there, we've got a very, very short and sweet top tips to look out for phishing emails. So we'll make that available to you all as well. But I just wanted to thank Neil, Simon, John and David for an insightful discussion today. And we look forward to you hopefully joining us all on the series in the new year. So Merry Christmas and have a Happy New Year, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Very much.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.